Yo, 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 what's up, everybody? Thank you for tuning in to yet again another fantastic indie creator interview. It's your Cape Sir Cody, and we're keeping it geekly with our new guest, Nicole Satterfield. We're here to break down Riley, bad things for the right reasons, and everything in between. I had the chance to read several chapters over on Global Comics. Everyone watching, you can read this for free, too. This is an awesome webcomic. Nicole, this is your first time on the show. I know we've talked several times in spaces. How you feeling? How have you been since, the last time we've chatted?
Oh, good. Working away. You got a lot to do when you're doing the art and the writing of it. It's a lot to balance, but it keeps me busy.
Absolutely, absolutely. And that's the thing. That's the beauty of this, right? Like, I find that, like, staying busy is like, it just makes life that much more enjoyable. Like, you're doing what you love, and it might seem like a lot, but it's like you love doing it. It'd be way worse than it was something if you didn't love, right?
Oh, yeah. I mean, we all have the dreaded hands that I figure out how to hide in every panel, but everything else seems to come out good.
So,
Oh, yeah.
I was gonna say, Nicole, for anyone who might not know who you are, give us a little introduction to who you are and how you got into creating webcomics.
Well, it's kind of a long road, but first off, of course, my name's Nicole Satterfield. I make, like you said, Riley. It's funny. I got my start in creativity, I guess, in this way, in video. I'm actually by trade a video editor, and I've always drawn and kind of done some stuff like that. And I was working on my side projects. You know how you do. You've got your stuff that you do professionally, but you got stuff passion projects that you want to do. And I had written a script for a thing that may or may not ever be a thing. So but it's science fiction, right? I love science fiction, and science fiction is expensive to make. And this original idea was a live action property that I was tooling around, maybe doing a project with, and I was just looking at it, and it's like, I don't know if I'll ever be able to afford to to even make a pilot or something like this.
Mm-hmm.
But I'm looking at the storyboards of it, right? And I'm like, I've always loved comics. I've written, I've read a gazillion of them, and I'm like, it's funny how storyboards look a lot like panels, like they're simplified essentially, but there they are. And I was like, well, I wonder if I just turned this sequence into a comic page, and that first page roughly is what you see at the beginning, is the coffee being spilled over and everything like that, and someone being shot. And I just went, I think this would make a good comic. And so I just dived in head first, kind of, and started, because I already had stuff that I'd done, essentially character sheets for, clothing designs, for costuming and stuff like that. And so I just kind of took that and developed it into a full character sheet for Riley. And that's kind of how this particular project leapt off.
It's so awesome. We have our good friend Juicy joining us over on Twitch, stopping in to say hi. Good morning. Thank you for joining us on this stream. So Riley is a badass. I mean, when you first introduced her within this series, I didn't know she was the good guy. I thought she was the bad guy because she's out here taking off heads left and right. And I also love just how brutal this comic starts off, like right off the rip. I mean, someone's losing their head, like right in the first couple scrolls down. What kind of like fueled you to want to start off so violently with Riley's introduction? Well,
I want to establish who the character is as quickly as possible. I want you to know who you're dealing with, and Riley has lived in a world where violence is the answer. That this is her world. And it comes to the beginning of that character, because going back to the creation of Riley, she wasn't the main character of the story I was writing. She was the villain of the week. And I'm writing, I'm writing this thing. And, if for people who don't know anything about scripts, you have about, for a movie or television, so roughly about a page a minute. So every page equals about a minute. And I realized at some point I had written 7 or 8 pages just about this one character. And I went, okay, this is something like this is something else. Like,
That's
and
how
then I
you. That's how
started
you knew you had like a protagonist.
Yeah, because she was far more interesting, quite frankly, than the other characters that are the good guys
Hmm.
that I was writing. She was far more interesting, and like Casanova and the way and her interaction with the world was all there from the beginning. And yeah, it's just Riley is in my mind the goon. Like in a James Bond story, Riley would be the bad love interest,
Hmm.
right? She would be the bad guy. She's the one that tries to kill him.
Hmm.
And that's who this character is, because to me, in a lot of those movies, and for good reason, movies and comics and stories, those characters don't get fleshed out other than they're the bad guy, right? They're
Yeah.
they're the second tier person. But if you think about them in a real world sense, they were born, they had a childhood, they they lived up to that point till they met the hero and then died horribly in some pun. you know.
Yeah, that's a
Uh,
way unique, approach to it. I don't think I've ever, sat there and considered like, this henchman sucks right now, but he used to wake up Saturday morning and eat cereal watching Recess, probably. Like,
yeah, it's if you think about it, it's like what's the one from GoldenEye where he throws the hat? That's someone who immigrated, to that signed papers,
struggled to get where he got, like, earned his place in society.
worked his way up the goon chain, like whatever that looks like, had a life.
Probably was on like a keto diet, working out very hard to maintain his figure. I get it.
Yeah, I mean, probably did some like arm refs. Like you got to have like good arms to throw a hat like that, right? Like how did he learn to do that? Like, but yeah, and that's kind of where I started with Riley is that she's in a different story, in someone else's story, she's the bad guy. She is the villain, you know. And I bring it up in my, I guess you'd call it the synopsis at the beginning, is the entire story I want to tell with Riley is how many bad things are you allowed to do a right thing, right? Like
So,
what's the moral cost? Moral math.
well,
Right?
they say three lefts make a right, so I don't know.
Yeah, I mean, yeah, but it's and to go back to your original question, that's why I wanted that opening, is that is Riley, how she presents herself to the entire world,
Mhm.
right? And then once she gets back home on the jab, her shuttle, that's where we see who she is on the inside, literally and figuratively, outside this armor. And so I wanted that opening has to set up, what she's willing to do, and I want the audience to, whether you're on board with her or not, that's fine. If you think she's a full villain, yeah, she kills people.
I would say I'm about 50-50 because there's a scene in particular early on where she gets to her target and she's like, double my credits, 1 mil. And the guy's like, I can't pay that. She's like, well, I was going to kill you anyways. The girl has to make a little extra. And then I'm like, damn, okay, Riley. Yep. All right. Yeah. Like, I see it, but like, shoo, like just the fact that she had to rub it in his face before she blasted him, like, was perfect.
I mean, that's who she is too, because as you see later on, not to spoil too much, but later on you see that Riley actually hasn't always been the top of the power dynamic in her life, and so she kind of either subconsciously or on purpose in this case shows that I'm on top. I'm the most important person in this room, and you're gonna know it, right? And so that's what she's lived with.
So she has some really interesting, designs with her armor, with her weapons. I love, like, the armor is made to keep her, warm and safe from the cold. Parts of it, gets knocked out by the EMP. But I also really, really enjoyed, like, the weapon too, the way she was able to snap the barrel off of it, strap it to her back. What was some of your inspirations for some of these designs?
So for the armor, I specifically try to seek out stuff that you see less often. I mean, you dig deep enough, you'll find references to everything in the world. But like a lot of Star Wars references, like 40s kind of technology, obviously World War II stuff and everything like that. But a lot of people don't realize that it also favors a lot of medieval, especially with the T crosses and stuff like that in the faceplates.
Hmm.
So I tried to go back further than that. I tried to go either 30s, or I tried to go like samurai, like a lot of the shoulder stuff is inspired by the shoulder blades of that. Of course, ultimately, a lot of reference comes from like Alien. I'm a big believer of the cassette futurism.
Hmm.
I love that chunky look. Weapons, I try to go out of my way to find stuff that isn't referenced quite as much, especially when there's a lot of gunslinger stuff out there. So Riley's six shooter, while is a six shooter, is a little bit less common. It's a 357, so it has a little bit of a chunkier look
Hmm.
to it, kind of going with again that bigger, chunkier style. The break barrel thing is actually a real world weapon. It's forgive me, I'm not. I'm trying to remember. It was an AR something that I saw, and it actually really does break apart like
Yeah.
that for carry. Now, of course, you wouldn't carry it on your back like that, but I just thought I wanted to design something that feels practical and real, because she needs to move in this armor, and so having it something that could grab on your back or whatever like that. Um, I didn't want it like getting hung on stuff,
I really love the part too where they got hit with the EMP grenade and she busts out the revolver and she's like, well, one thing that doesn't an EMP can't stop is a firing pin. And I just loved like how in depth you got with things too. You weren't afraid to really dive into the mechanics of things and how they work to kind of bring it into this world.
Well, yeah. So there's I think that a lot of like fantasy and science fiction writers will understand me when I say this. There's stuff that you say out loud, and there's stuff that you have in your Bible that you're keeping in your head. And in my head, that EMP grenade is like the maximum machine gun from World War One.
Hmm.
Handheld EMPs changed Riley's universe. That all of a sudden they had like laser guns and all this stuff, like you saw the plasma thrower that one of the enemies saw in that scene, and that essentially that EMP destroyed all that technology, because you can no longer rely upon it, because someone could just take a $10 grenade and chunk it and destroy your weapon. So you need more primitive weapons, ironically, to survive. So Riley's suit essentially fails because of the EMP. The other person's armor literally had, her entire vision was based on cameras, right? So
Yeah,
she had to
yeah.
take the helmet off. Her weapon was useless now because of the EMP. Riley's was the only one that still functioned because, yeah, it's a firing pin. You're not going to stop that from firing.
And I really love the interaction with the ship too. The itsy bitsy spider, because she wasn't able to beep in through her armbands. I just love how intricate everything felt, even down to when she boarded the ship. Her gun storage looked filled out. You added so much detail and immersion to a lot of the environments. Her locker had different outfits in, where a lot of that would have probably just been colored or like a blob. Like you actually went in there and penciled in the detail.
Well, I try to. I walk. I feel like one. Thank you. That's very nice that you noticed that. It's one of those things where I try to walk a line with Riley, where my instinct is, because I used to do just like steals of stuff, and in that, when you're not producing a comic, you can spend all the time in the world that you want,
Yeah.
doing these little, what they call them in Star Wars, they call them greeblies. It's the little nonsense parts and stuff like that.
Hmm.
But in a comic, even though again, it's an indie comic, I theoretically could take as long as I want. I personally try to put myself on a timetable, so there's a certain level of detail that I try to get to and also go over as well. But I feel like that there's certain things that shouldn't be skipped over, and I wanted it to feel like a real space. This
Hmm.
isn't the Enterprise, which while I love the Enterprise, is their workplace, right? It's essentially like going to work. That it's a destroyer, or whatever. This is a camper. This is her home. This is her
Yeah.
mobile home. She lives there. That's why there's carpet on the floor. There's these little things that make it a home. and her soup storage and different T-shirts and stuff. Although I resisted a joke to have nothing but all the same jumpsuit all
Yeah.
lined up. That's a classic cartoon joke, but
Mhm.
I resisted that because it's like it's make it a little more realistic. uh,
So, what was the direction for heading towards a webcomic over a traditional comic?
um, well, quite frankly, I thought that I would be able to reach a audience quicker. Nowadays there's a lot of there's quite just there's a lot of people online. You have the different platforms um that the I sound so old. The kids these days like to get on it and
You're
on their
with the
phones.
skateboard, like, hey, fellow kids.
Yeah, hey Philip. Yeah, yeah. But it's true though. There's a lot, and now that's not to say that I would ever oppose um, doing a traditional comic. I mean, in fact, I don't think this is a spoiler or anything. I'm putting this out there. Whenever I finish this book of Riley, I have every intention of going back and re-releasing the exact same book, but in page format for people who don't like
Oh,
the
that's gonna
vertical
be
strip.
awesome.
Yeah, and I just feel like that's fair. Just bear with me because that's going to be a little bit of rearranging. So that's why I've put it off to doing it at the end. But yeah, I just feel like it'd be a quicker go, especially. And I'm not trying to be like down or anything, but if I invested in like a physical comic, there's a lot more risk for me involved
Hmm.
with that. And I just don't have a lot of money to throw around. And I figured if people like this, then great. If not, I'm going to make it for myself. If I get 0 views, I'm still going to come out with the next chapter. you know,
No,
because
absolutely.
because I'm enjoying it. I think it was R. R. Martin that said something really beautiful to me, which was someone asked him, what is a writer, and he said a writer is someone who gets up in the morning and writes knowing no one's going to read it.
That's some
And
good stuff, though, right? Because you want
yeah,
people to read your stuff. That's like,
yeah,
you know,
but it's in you to create, right? and
yeah.
and and at the end of the day, I wanted to create, and I wanted to do that as freely as possible. So I feel like I can do anything that I want to in a digital format like that. So
That's so awesome. We have our good friend CM Holy joining us over on Twitch, throwing in some hyped emotes. Thank you for joining us, Chris. It's always a pleasure seeing you. So, I mean, with Riley, we see the sci-fi approach. I mean, what was the reasoning for making it a sci-fi? Was there any special representation behind that?
well, yeah. So it's funny. I think, how do I say this? I think as writers, we both write consciously and subconsciously, and that sounds so. I know that sounds a little fart sniffy, but it's true though. I think that
Mm-hmm.
we write things that we don't even realize that we're writing, and I was writing Riley for years uh, before February, which is my transition. I came out in February 26th of this year, and you know, I go back. I have several friends that we were talking about it, and they were all like, "Well, clearly this is a trans story." And I was like, beforehand, I was like, I don't know, and then I come out and I read it, and it's like, yeah, that's exactly what this is, yeah. And it's really really obvious from the beginning, and it's what the great thing about science fiction is we can talk about things in a way that is a little bit more easy to swallow because for whatever reason, if you set something, if I could set Riley, honestly, I could take Riley, and instead of a spaceship, she has a pickup truck, and she's a hired CIA agent, right, going around, and you could do within reason a similar story.
Mm-hmm.
But if you set it in modern times, that has all the trappings of the problems that we have right now, of people getting up in arms. Now, that's not to say that I haven't gotten backlash from stuff, but for whatever reason, the magic of science fiction, of fantasy, of even comedy, there's that look at this hand, you won't see what this hand is doing,
Mm-hmm.
right? And that's one of the things that, well, I always kind of surprise people when I tell them that Riley is greatly influenced by Star Trek because it doesn't seem very Star Trek-ish. It's a very dark future, very brutal future, but it is because I believe in the Gene Roddenberry train of thought, which is if you're going to write, have something to say. And I have something to say. Riley is ostracized from society. She's angry. She feels separate. She is other. And no matter what she does, she will always be other because she's 6'8", and her face is full of scars. And she will never fit in this square peg that people want her to be in, right? And she is who she is, and I think that says a lot right there.
That's powerful. I love that. And Riley is a badass. I mean, she ran the prison when she was in there. She took down the main honcho and became the boss of prison. Like, no one F's with Riley and gets away with it, it feels like. I think I've only read up to chapter 7 or chapter 8, and I mean chapter 7 was a pretty heavy chapter too, kind of the going back into her her childhood and just the nightmares that she experienced. Like, shoo. We have our good friend Panda over on Twitch dropping in to say agree on the sci-fi. Thank you, Panda, for dropping in. We appreciate to see you, buddy. So Nicole, what's next for you in 2023? For everyone watching, right here is the link to check out this awesome series on Global Comics for free. Do you have any other chapters of Riley coming out? Do you have any other projects in store for you for the rest of the year?
Oh yeah, I mean, I always got something cooking. The next chapter of Riley, I'm working on it right now. Where we last left off, Riley was getting ready to sneak into a fancy society party, and we're going to see the results of that. It's actually an extra big chapter. I'm taking a little longer than usual on this chapter. It's going to be a lot of stuff happening in this chapter. So there's that I'm working on. That's going to come out in the next few months. Of course, I'm just rolling right into the next chapter of Riley, and that's what I'm working on probably for the foreseeable of 2023. In the background, I'm writing some stuff. I'm working on my first horror, sci-fi horror. So in the next few years, that may be a thing that comes out. Hush hush, I don't know. But yeah, that's fun. That's stretching I've told people that's scratching a different part of my brain. That's fun. So that might be something that comes in the future. But yeah, just working on the next thing of Riley's always the over the hill.
That's awesome, and I can't wait to see what that horror story looks like coming out from you. You said maybe in 2023 we could expect that later on?
No, the horror thing would be 2024, 2025.
Ooh, okay, so stay tuned.
I the writing process, is something that I take longer on than when I start pumping out the pages.
Not a problem, though. I think taking time with the writing, proves that, the rest of that story is going to stand on good structure. So, taking your time always pays off. Nicole, I know this is your first time on the show, but we always end the show on a really strong note. I always love to ask for a piece of advice and then what you're consuming. So with that being said, for anyone looking to get into creating comics, whether it's the art, the writing, or anything in between, and maybe they're just having trouble just getting going, they're just sitting at their desk, sitting at their computer, and then they just can't hit go. What would you offer them as a piece of advice to help motivate them?
Nothing gets created if you don't try. And a blank page is nothing but ambition and the future. It's don't be afraid to just put something down, even if you delete it later. It's something to put down and look at or enjoy. And whether that's writing or art, is nothing gets done if you don't do nothing. And I know that sounds funny, but it's true. I've never knock on wood, I've never had fear of the blank page, because I'm just going to put something down, whether whatever that is I'm going to put something down today. And it's never disappointing to just let your thoughts flow.
Awesome. Now, Nicole, outside of creating, what are you consuming? Video games, TV shows, movies, books, comics, webcomics.
So as far as like video games, a group of us have been replaying. Well, you can always play it, but Stellaris, which is a real-time strategy space game, and it has some really beautiful art. If you're not into video games, just look up the art for it. It's really pretty game. Media. Let's see. You put me on the spot. Because I'm really bad about rewatching stuff. I recently rewatched Wrath of Khan because, as you can tell, I have a slight Star Trek obsession. Actually, Star Trek. If you look up on YouTube, there's Resurgence, I think, or it's a YouTuber has created a CGI recreation of what it would look like for the Enterprise D. This means nothing to anybody else, but Enterprise D to be lifted up and Spock's there and all this. It's really
that's so cool though.
Yeah,
that's awesome. That is awesome. Yeah. Hey, I mean, rewatching old stuff is just as important as rewatching new stuff too. I mean, for me, I used to rewatch Futurama religiously. That was like my comfort show. Right. That and BoJack Horseman for whatever reason. Whenever I was like depressed or down in the dumps, I'd watch the horse just disassemble his life and feel a little bit better about myself. I don't know what it was.
Yeah, I mean, Cowboy Bebop is always a good rewatch.
Yes, absolutely.
I love that. Again, Alien, Cowboy Bebop, huge influences on my art style. It's just such a pretty show. It rips your heart out, but it's pretty. It does.
Well, it is time for us to wrap up. This was your first interview. This was one hell of a conversation. Look at us. We almost made it through the full 30 minutes too. How are you feeling? Are you still nervous, or was that ice broken? You feel warmed up, ready for the next interview?
You know, I completely forgot that we were doing the thing, and I was just talking.
Let's go. That's the beauty of the show. And with that being said, guys, it is time for us to wrap up. I hope you all have a lovely day, but most importantly, guys, keep it geekly.